Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast, where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. And each week, we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. I'm your host, Barry, and today we're lucky enough to have a remarkable guest joining us, Adam Pearce, co-founder of Blend Commerce. Hello, Adam. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Andy. Barry. Great to be with you.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak to us. So, for those people who don't know who you are or the company that you work at, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and the company?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Adam Pearce, like you said, and I co-founded a CRO agency called Blend Commerce. So some people might be saying, well, what the heck is a CRO agency? And very simply, we do three things. If you are an e-commerce brand or a brand that is selling online, we as a group of people will try and get customers to either buy now, buy more, or buy again. And very simply, that's exactly what we do.
Is it something that you've always been interested, like e-commerce? Or was it something you just happened to gravitate towards?
Completely and utterly fell into it.
Oh, really?
I'm now, I guess, at the ripe old age of 39. I am now in my fourth or fifth career. Basically, to cut a long story short, I was about 12, 13 years ago working for an education app company. My brother-in-law, who was a quantity surveyor, was like, there's this thing called e-commerce and there's this thing called Shopify coming. I'm going to retrain and be a developer. To which I said, you're mad. He then proved me wrong and was like, we need someone to come in and do marketing. We got together and blended marketing and development together, hence the name Blend. In 2025, that sounds rather naff, but a few years ago, we thought it sounded good. And that's kind of how we fell into it. And obviously, over time, we have kind of changed the format of what we did, this area we specialized in. But yeah, went into business with my brother-in-law. We haven't killed each other yet. And yeah, we've got a team of 13 people. So yeah, it's so far so good.
So you mentioned there that you kind of working with your brother. What other networking groups are there? Has networking been important for you in starting up your companies?
Yeah, massively. I mean, we as an agency, when we started, we used event marketing as a way to promote what we did. And actually, just after COVID, me and my business partner were kind of saying, look, there wasn't really anything around in the market that we wanted to go to. Being honest with you, look, a lot of the e-commerce events that were around at the time were very much based around getting boozed up in some crap hotel, chicken and white wine sauce, the stuff that no one really wants to go to. So we actually started an e-commerce group called the Ecom Collab Club, which is a networking group. Started off with 30 people in a cinema in Leicester Square in London. That was 3 years ago. We now have about 150 people every month. And that's brands, that's agencies, and that's tech providers all getting together. Very tongue in cheek, but very relaxed and useful networking event. And that, helps us as a business to grow the kind of people that we have involved with us.
So can you let's just kind of break down how you go about it. Let's say a merchant approaches you and say we've got interest in your company. Like, do you audit? How, do you look at the merchant's online store? Like, what are the first critical areas that you examine?
I mean, the most important thing for us is making sure that they actually need us, because typically with CRO, people say, well, look, we can change this, I can change that, I mean, test that. That kind of very scattergun approach, it's nice for an agency to take people's money, but does it get results? Not really. So for us, the first thing is we're kind of saying, look, as a brand, do you have 50,000 visitors a month as a minimum? With that number, that means that we can then go and do the data-backed activities like A/B testing for the site. So that's the first thing. The second thing is then once they've kind of passed that criteria, we are then saying to them, okay, what we need to do is get into that data. A lot of the time with businesses, and I think this is true for every business, there will always be opinions about how we can improve a website, regardless of what kind of business you're in. But with what we're doing here is we do something called the CRO Insights service. And what this is that we have our strategists go into the Google Analytics data, we go into the platform data and the heat mapping data, look at all that together and say, off the back of this, what can we see is going wrong? What are customers doing? What are they not doing? And what then needs to be fixed? And with that, then we create a roadmap for at least 6 months about what they can then do to implement and also A/B test on the site as well.
So it's interesting you talk about like some of the demands or some of the requirements that customers may ask of you. Like, how do you sift through like the wish lists, the things that, they're just dreaming up and think, oh, let's just put it in there, regardless of whether it adds value, and those things that actually are really pivotal or really fundamental to the experience?
I mean, look, it's a good point because a lot of the time when we get those wish lists, unfortunately, we do tend to upset people, and it tends to be the founders when they have got something in their mind that they want. And the conversation was to go through is that look, ultimately, there might be something that you want because you feel that it looks good or it's going to reflect on your brand well. But if the data isn't there to support that thing that you need from what customers are doing and not doing on site, there really is very little point in you spending, dollars or pounds in terms of trying to get that done. So we always take that approach of kind of saying, look, where a brand comes into us, if you have a wish list or a snag list or, on the back of a fag packet list of things you want doing, give that to us. We will try and find data that either supports that hypothesis or not, present that back to you, and then we can make a plan after that. But without you having that, the random, let's test this, let's build that, you're just going to throw money literally into a fire pit.
Are there certain metrics that you rely on like more to evaluate the health of like a Shopify store's performance?
I mean, the important thing really is that a lot of the time when e-commerce, we're obsessed with conversion rate and it's kind of seen as the be all and end all. It absolutely is not. And the reason I say that is conversion rate is one of the levers that you've got to drive profit. So yes, okay, conversion rate, the amount of people that are actually buying is a percentage of the come on site, but average order value, how much are they spending? Return customer rate, purchase frequency. These are all levers that you can pull as the owner or operator of an e-commerce business, and you will need to pull different levers at different times to drive profitability. So, for example, you might be a vitamin store, which we do a lot of work with. You might find that actually, look, conversion rate is great and it's selling on there at maybe 4.5%, 5%. But actually, from an average order value, perhaps the average order value is going down. Now, in that situation, your profitability is going down. What can we look at to try and improve that? So, if we know that average order value, the amount that customers are ordering, isn't as high as we want it to be, what can we see them doing on site? What can we see them not doing? What are the blockers that we can remove? What is the new functionality we can bring in to get them to buy more? Can we bundle up products better? Can we upsell better? Can we cross sell better? So, that will be kind of the work in process and sort of the metrics we look at to try and then drive that profitability up for the company.
Have there been like any like aha moments when you realized like the impact of optimizing checkout and conversion flows?
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing with conversion optimization is a lot of the time the stuff that we do is actually quite boring. And a lot of the time when people come in, they're expecting something new and sexy and cool and slick. And just an example, one of the things that we know always works very well in terms of increasing conversion rate, in terms of when you get to checkout, displaying the credit card options or the payment options before you then actually get to checkout. So, for example, on cart, we've done that test a number of times, and consistently you add between 20 to 30% on top of the conversion rate. So, something that is very basic and simple, but in that scenario, the psychology is before a customer then gets to that point where they have to enter their credit card or choose the payment method, they feel comfortable with the fact they know they can pay with PayPal, they know they can pay with Apple Pay, whatever it might be. So those kind of small things, you always get big wins opposed to the big, fancy, flashy, let's make this really cool, sexy looking landing page. A lot of the time, unfortunately, that kind of stuff doesn't turn the needle as much as those small tweaks that you made.
So you mentioned one of the successful systems that you have there. What about things that potentially turn customers away or turn customers off? Are there things that you thought, oh, this might work, but actually it proved counterintuitive?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things a lot of the time that most companies struggle with is how do you actually display all the information to your customers? So if you're a clothing company, then well, actually, how do you tell them about the care? How do you tell them about the materials, where it's sourced from, all that kind of thing? Now, one brand, oh, it's only one brand, a number of brands we work with had this scenario where they are seeing, look, their product page is the hub of all information. Customers don't bother going to homepages anymore. They assess you and verify you from that particular homepage. Now, we had one company, I remember probably about 3 years ago, that were doing a lot of great stuff. They were B Corp. They had all these different verifications that they got, and they wanted to bring them onto the product page. Now, interestingly, with them, we used accordion menus in their product page to put that information in. What we actually saw with that is the conversion rate dipped as a result of doing it.
Mm.
And I think, sometimes in some situations, there are companies whereby you are making more of an impulse buy purchase. And actually, in the end, what happened with that company is that we actually looked at the traffic that was being driven from a PPC perspective, the pay-per-click advertising from Meta, from Google Ads, that actually needed to change to then improve that conversion rate again. But that process took about 6 months to work out. But look, with A/B testing with the CRO, I do want to say, look, a lot of the time you are going to have situations where tests do fail, and you want that to happen because ultimately, when a test does fail, you rule something out. Generally speaking, with A/B testing, you want about 7 out of 10 tests to work and 3 out of 10 tests not to work, because then you are eliminating ideas, you are eliminating lines of inquiry out rather than just going, look, it's win, win, win all the time.
How do you tailor CRO strategies for brands at different stages? For example, early stage launch to upscaling enterprises.
I mean, basically, it's about, with the scale there, it's about data. So if you are below that 50,000 visitors per month, you can still do CRO, but what you're going to be doing is you're going to be basing it on things like, for example, customer reviews. So have customers in the reviews said a mentioned about particular process on the site or particular bit of information on the site. Have you got net promoter scores? So once you've checked out and you ask customer about the experience, what can you glean from that information to then go and make changes on site? From the point of view of then getting beyond that, when you've got data, then you can really start using things like heat mapping tools like Microsoft Clarity, and you can then start putting that into play with A/B tests, putting it into play with implementation as well. And then once you get to kind of beyond that 150,000 visitors a month, the rate at which you can A/B test is actually a lot faster, because ultimately those tests will get to statistical significance quicker, and you can then test more stuff. So it's about making sure, I think, with any service or product, you have something that matches the rate of speed that you're traveling at as an organization at the moment in time to what you need. Don't go in and do overkill. So if you were a startup brand, you wouldn't go in and probably start spending $500,000 a month on ads, because most people don't have that connection. Equally, you don't know enough in terms of learning from the platform to do that. Exactly the same principle as with CRO.
And what role does customer segmentation and personalization play in your optimization process?
It's big, and I think the problem is with customization and personalization, as I think over the past few years, is that it's kind of been used too much as a term, and things like personalization, whereby we're saying, a brand might say, look, we're personalizing their emails by putting their name in. Hi, Adam, in email. That isn't personalization. Personalization for me is about when I go to an e-commerce site or an e-commerce experience, the products that are shown to me are based on what I need and my likes and dislikes based on my previous interactions with that site. So if I go to, say, for example, with Amazon, everyone probably listening to this will have used Amazon. You go to the Amazon homepage, it's going to be showing you products that are relevant to you based on your previous purchases. That for me is a personalization you need to be thinking about from that point of view. And I think, from a customization perspective as well, when it comes to making sure that you are doing A/B testing that is based around that, using your zero party data, so from things like on site quizzes, using then again things like market research you might do in terms of surveys, jobs to be done surveys, implementing that for different segments. That's where it can really come into play. You're dealing with a smaller cohort, a smaller group of people, but if you can make bigger gains in conversion rate with those groups and bigger gains in AOV, that's when your profit's going to go up. So think micro, not macro.
Are there any common mistakes that you see brands making, for example, when they expand into international markets or new markets?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest problem is that when you think about going into new markets, doing the same thing and rinse and repeat. Now, yeah, we're kind of recording this, I guess, midway through 2025. One brand that did exactly that was Liquid Death from the UK. So the water brand, they bought exactly the same product, exactly the same market at the UK market. and it didn't work. Fundamentally, the product didn't work because people were not used to drinking water out of those tall boy cans that they would be in the US. They got associated with drinking, things like Monster in the UK, or those energy drinks.
Mm.
So it's the same principle, I think, within e-commerce brand, is that when you do go into a different market, you need to understand that the core job to be done, is that the same as it is in the UK, as it might be in the US, as it is in Italy? Or is it the same as it might be in South Africa, as it is in, Chile, for example? So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, as well, is that particularly brands that sell subscriptions, so food, drinks, pet food, all that kind of stuff, vitamin supplements, the rate of consumption and the way that people consume is going to be different in different markets. So again, making sure that you do either pre-research or giving a wider set of options initially is something that's really important. So it's more about the tangible delivery of that product in terms of what they get and what they're using it tends to be the biggest mistake, rather than a piece of technology or the way a website looks, for example, as a mistake.
That's so interesting to understand that cultural impact on processes and products. That I never thought of it that way before. Like when you see something, if it's so culturally relevant, like UK, where we see like fizzy drinks, etc., in cans, but an American might see something different, like water or whatever, for example. So I find that's fascinating. Just a quick question about tools, because you mentioned some of the tools earlier in the conversation. Are there any tools or platforms that are essential in your toolkit, especially like for driving conversion or revenue growth?
I mean, I think the important thing for us is that we need to be able to have a good understanding of what customers are doing and what they're not doing. And we can do that kind of through qualitative and sort of quantitative methods. From a qualitative perspective, some of the really key things for us are things like Microsoft Clarity, which is a heat mapping tool, and Hotjar, again, equally great heat mapping tool. But equally as well, things like reviews.io, whereby you can do net promoter scores. So gaining that information, gathering the picture through the qualitative side. From a quantitative side, we do a lot of in-house analysis, but there are tools like OmniConvert, there are tools like IntelliGems, Convert.com, which both help with the data analysis, but also with A/B testing as well. So giving us an ability to assess and then implement, those are the key things that we need to be able to do what we need to do for clients, which is getting to buy now, buy more, or buy again.
When you bring in like CRO into like an existing market operation, how do you get the buy-in from stakeholders? Are they generally all in and that's why they're contacting you? Or some of them are a bit like, let's just see how it goes?
Oh man, I wish they were all in, Barry. This is your make my life a hell of a lot easier, because I still do run obviously the sales for us as a company. I think with CRO, what tends to happen is that there is an advocate internally. Now, they might be the e-commerce manager, they might be the e-commerce director, they might be, actually a member of the marketing team. But the problem with CRO is that because it does touch lots of different areas and affects things that lots of people do, so SEO, PPC, paid ads, operations, everyone will have an opinion on the efficacy of doing CRO. So what we have to do very carefully is to extrapolate and look at the scenario. So for example, if we're looking at a site, we can currently see that your conversion rate is 2%, but the industry average is 3.5%. We think that actually you should be around 4%. What does that mean? Well, what it means is that actually, from a paid ads perspective, the efficacy of the ads, the ROAS, is going to improve. Great, paid ads team on side. When it comes from an SEO perspective, well, actually, the rankings for those pages that have been created by the SEO team, the value of those pages goes up. Great, SEO team on side. On the flip side, though, when you have operations teams involved, or chief operations officer or operations director, for them, this is actually a headache, because they're saying, well, look, if we are now converting at 4% rather than 2%, actually we're increasing our volume by double. So what does that mean for us from a practical process? That's when we have to do a bit more hand holding. So we might always think, in a scenario of e-commerce, the more you sell, the better. The more you sell, and with that, there are going to be more headaches. And you have to think very careful in our industry that you think about the thoughts and feelings and day-to-day roles of the people that are involved. It's not just putting a website live, it's the practicality, it's the delivery, it's the fulfillment of everything that then goes with it.
So, as I'm quite old, as some of you may already be aware, I've moved generally from like ordering online via your normal desktop to actually doing a lot on the phone now. Do you approach this differently, like the mobile commerce from your standard like PC commerce? And if you do it differently, how?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes and no. Yes, in the sense of we have to analyze the data, in the sense of we need to see specifically what customers are and aren't doing on mobile. Generally, these days, most e-commerce stores, their traffic is between about 60 and 90% on mobile. So mobile is always going to be a big part of what needs to be done. From an implementation point of view, we will do separate A/B testing and separate features and functionality on mobile than what we might do on desktop. So a really good example of this is on desktop. Typically, when you go to an e-commerce site, you will see a search bar at the top and a little magnifying glass to allow you to search into. Generally speaking, as e-commerce has evolved, search on mobile has not been something that has been prevalent or been used much. We've taken an approach recently where what we do is that we expose search on mobile for a lot of brands, and what that does is it actually generally increases the rate of search on mobile, where we expose it rather than being a magnifying glass, by about 20%. When you do that, conversion rate and AOV also generally jump between about 15 and 35%. So that small change, but just on mobile, again, making a big difference to the bottom line of the company, not just with a certain subset of customers.
Interesting. Are there any like emerging trends, for example, like headless commerce or AR that you're most excited about?
I think the biggest thing for me at the moment is what's happening with AI and e-commerce. Now, I know probably people are going to say, oh, another guy talking about AI, but the practical thing for me is that, look, as a shopper, we are going to move towards LLMs and using ChatGPT to shop. ChatGPT has the fantastic ability to be able to recommend and give you products that you need. With e-commerce, what is going to happen is that the quality of information on your product pages become more and more important, because the companies out there that optimize those product pages to give ChatGPT and other LLMs the information they need, you are going to be the companies that are shown on those and are then ultimately being purchased. So the importance of an e-commerce site is still going to be there, but the importance is going to be how well that communicates with obviously tools like ChatGPT to then bring you the conversions over time as well.
So, Adam, let's imagine that you're not perfect, right? And in hindsight, are there any things that you would do differently if you could do them again?
Oh, Barrett, have you got all day? I mean, like, where do you want to start? I mean,
Maybe we can cut it down to like 2 minutes, maybe.
I think the first thing I would say, and I think no, I sort of I mentioned this earlier on as well, is that when we started an agency, we thought we could do everything. We thought we were SEO, PPC, CRO, any acronym you want to throw it from e-commerce, we do it all. We couldn't. We absolutely couldn't. And in fact, actually, about 6 months ago, we dropped one of our two services, which was actually email marketing. Now, this was quite painful to me because, look, I was an email marketer through and through. That's kind of what I did previously as well. But we realized that it was clouding and getting in the way of what we core service that we have, which was CRO. So I would definitely say, look, going more niche earlier on is something we should have done a long time ago. I think the businesses that are going more niche now are winning, both from a product level and also from a B2B service level. So that would be something that I would definitely say. And I think also as well, from a business point of view too, in terms of making mistakes, I think communication and focusing on communication early doors is really, really important. And what I mean by this is being very clear in terms of what you expect internally from communication. We are surrounded by tools like Slack, like WhatsApp, like email. We got into a bit of a pickle a few years ago where we weren't clear in terms of how we should and when we should communicate with each other. We really got into a problem whereby people were messaging all times of the day, all times of the night, giving too much information on Slack, so on and so forth. And we put together kind of a communications guide internally for the team to make sure that went away. But again, should be something that we should have stepped on earlier and made changes on. But yeah, I mean, look, I'll probably end there, Barry, because I think like, we're probably going to start nodding off. But yeah, lots of things we've learned to do better.
Okay, so let's give it, taking away from your own imperfections and concentrating on other people's imperfections. Let's say there's someone out there, an entrepreneur, just wanting to put their feet on the ground and they have some doubts. What advice would you give to them? What's the best thing that you can suggest to them when first starting a company for the first time?
I think in terms of starting now, I think the benefit everyone has is number one that what we are in the era of AI. So there is a lot of free advice, and if you know how to get it properly from tools like ChatGPT. I think from that point of view of okay, as an entrepreneur starting a business, I would get very laser clear on why, who, and how you want to produce something. Don't try and be something to every single person. In terms of your branding, be prepared to not be liked by a subset of people and be prepared to be loved by the people. Don't try and be something to every single person. That is, I think, still one of the biggest mistakes. The people that win in terms of business are the ones from the outset go, I'm prepared that some people are not going to like what we do. I'm prepared that some people are not going to like me personally, but I know we are going to have a loyal band of followers who will love us and be massive advocates for our business and for our brand.
Adam, that's amazing advice and a nice way to end the podcast. So, Adam, I want to thank you so much again for taking time to speak with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Barry. And obviously, if anyone is interested in finding out more about what we do, it's blendcommerce.com. And you can find me, Adam Pearce, on LinkedIn.
We love a good advertisement. There you go. That was Adam Pearce, co-founder of Blend Commerce.